All right, we're getting towards the end. You're about to buy your property. Congratulations. Now I'm going to tell you what to expect at the closing or just before the closing so that you are not caught off guard. Hopefully, you're watching this because you've gotten through the due diligence period, you've gotten through the inspections, you've worked through the hardest part of the transaction, and you are this much closer to becoming and a real estate investor. So let's talk about what to expect at the closing table. Now, the closing table is where everyone signs the documents and the house officially transfers from the seller to you as the buyer. Now, leading up to the closing, after the due diligence period, depending on your offer, it's quite customary that you have an appraisal and financing conditions. What this is there should be a deadline for you to get your appraisal back before closing. Depending how this is written and your state and the offer conditions to make your offer, if the appraisal comes in lower than the purchase price, you should have the ability to renegotiate the appraisal with the seller and say, listen, I know I'm buying this for 400 and the appraiser said it's worth 380. This is important because now we're $20,000 short. My mortgage lender will not give me $400,000 to buy a $380,000 house, but they will give me $380,000. It's a negotiation. You can say, I need you to drop the price to 380 for me to buy this house. And they may agree to that. And your strongest argument is, hey, your next buyer will get an appraisal done and it'll probably come in at the same value. So you should drop your price to match. However, they might say, that's great. I've gotten 4 offers that are $400,000. So I will try my luck on one of these other ones. Or there's an offer that's waived the appraisal contingency, or they're paying all cash. So there's not an appraiser that's going to come out and mess up the deal. But just be aware of your appraisal conditions and know that it should give you the ability to renegotiate the purchase price. I've many times been in this situation and they said, I'm sorry, I'm not going to renegotiate your price. And I say, that's fine. I will pay the difference. I'll make up that extra $20,000, bring an extra $20,000 to closing table on top of my down payment. That's my only way forward. And if the numbers make sense for me to continue to do that and make that move, then I will. So just be aware that appraisal will happen, and this will typically come after the due diligence period ends and before the closing occurs. Another condition is the financing condition, and this is also a contingency. In many offers, it's quite customary to say, hey, I have 21 days to get approved for a loan. Now, again, this varies. I've seen this stripped out of many contracts just to make your offer stronger, because what makes a offer strong is you are putting risk on yourself rather than putting your risk on the seller. So obviously, if you waive an appraisal contingency saying, I don't care what the appraisal comes in and I'll come out of pocket, that puts the risk on me as a buyer and makes my offer stronger. Financing contingency says, hey, if I can't get approved for a loan in 21 days, I get to back out of this deal and we get to move forward. That puts the risk on the seller, right? And sometimes it makes sense to do that. And sometimes it makes sense to say, I don't want a financing contingency. I'm confident that my mortgage is going to go through. And I'm going to give you some tips to make sure that that actually happens and you're not caught off guard. Because if you get to the closing table and you did not get approved for the financing, or the appraisal comes in way lower than you thought, and you can't handle that risk, well, you forfeit your earnest money in that situation. They can't force you to buy it because you're going to say, I can't afford it. I tried to buy it and I just can't afford it. But the earnest money, the down payment that you give them up front saying, hey, I'm serious about this, well, you default that and it goes to your seller. However, if you decide to move forward and you find a way forward, that earnest money comes back to you and gets applied as your down payment amount for your mortgage bank. So that is the purpose of the earnest money. And you got to be aware of the appraisal contingency, which determines the value of your property, which is sent by an independent third-party vendor from the mortgage lender, and your financing contingency, which says, hey, I have X amount of days to get approved for a loan. This always falls between the due diligence period typically and the closing date. So just be aware those are 2 other deadlines that you need to have a talk with your agent or the closing lender or your mortgage lender and make sure you're on top of all these deadlines that it's coming through. Now, It's super important to not open a new credit card while you're under contract on a property. Don't quit your job. Don't buy a car or make a large cash deposit at this time. You have a pre-approval letter that says, based on their current job situation, their current debts, their current deposits, I can approve them for a loan. And they are going to double and triple check this all the way up until the day before closing, sometimes the day of the closing, to make sure you have not changed what it was when they give you a pre-approval. So if you open up a new credit card, that throws your debt to income balance and ratio out of whack and could kill the deal. If you quit your job, well, that will definitely kill the deal because they're going to call your employer the day of the closing and confirm you're still employed. They don't want to give a mortgage to someone who just recently lost their job or quit their job. If you're switching jobs or anything, that's fine as long as you have a new offer letter that you can provide to your mortgage lender. Your mortgage lender is your partner. Do not try to keep anything from your mortgage lender. Be very transparent and open, and they will walk you down the path to make sure you get approved for a loan. Don't buy a new car for the same reasons, because that's going to throw your debt to income ratio, your balances, your finances out of whack. You may still be able to buy the house. It's just they've got to start the process all over again and running your credits and your numbers. And you don't want a lot of this last minute headache and stress. Wait till you close on the home and then go buy the car. And lastly, large cash deposits all have to be explained. They want to make sure you're not a terrorist or you're a drug dealer and that your money's actually on your taxes. It's coming from your day job. So if you get a windfall of cash or you pull out that money from your mattress, talk to your mortgage lender first and just say, what do I do with this money? If you need it, you have to have a story for it. You have to show where it came from. Your mortgage lender will walk you down the correct path to deposit that, or they might tell you, wait until after closing and then deposit it. But these 4 things have killed so many deals in the past for people I've worked with, and I want you to avoid it. The next thing is make sure you move with all lender requests. It's going to be a very annoying process getting a mortgage. Everyone goes through it, and their job is to make sure everything's buttoned up. They're going to look through your last 2 bank statements and your credit card statements and say, explain this purchase. Why is this credit here? What is going on? And it's crazy and it's ludicrous. However, you have to do it. You can't just ignore it. They will not give you the loan until you answer their questions in a way that makes sense to them. So do not bury your head in the sand. You want to get them as many answers as fast as possible so that they can get to work in improving your loan, because you don't want to lose a house because it took too long to approve your loan. So just quickly give them as much information, everything they ask for. It's going to be annoying. Just that is the part of the process. This is the person giving you 80% or sometimes more to buy your house. Just do what they say. Just that's the game. You have to do it. Avoiding it, telling them they're crazy doesn't work. They typically know that they're crazy. It's just the rules of the bank, okay, in order to get an approval. You'll get variations throughout the process between going under contract and to the closing table of what the closing costs are going to be and what the numbers are going to be. It's because over that time, they're getting more and more information. The lender's doing their due diligence. So you're going to get some early documents that are going to be a little off, and you're going to tell them that's a little off. They're going to say, sign it anyway, because their numbers are going to get better and better as they get more information from you, as they're getting quotes from other banks and investors to give you the best loan possible. However, there's a law that it has to be the final numbers at least 3 days before closing, and you're going to have to sign a disclosure saying, I received what the final numbers are 3 days before closing. If you don't have that, and if you don't sign that, well, then you have to wait 3 days till after you do get that and after you do sign that. So just know the final numbers will come out 3 days, so you have time to make sure that if there are any problems, they can fix it. So just be on the lookout for this. Do not hide from your lender. Be super communicative with them. And yes, one more time, it's going to be stupid, dumb requests. You got to answer it anyway. That's just the way it goes. Now let's talk about closing costs. You're going to have costs that don't include your down payment, right? So you have your down payment. maybe it's 10%, 15%, 20, 25, depending what you're buying and what the rates are and what you can afford. That is one part of the fees. You do not have to pay your agent because your agent is being paid by the seller. So don't worry about agent fees, but feel free to confirm with your agent in that case. Only time that I would say you would pay an agent when you're buying is maybe if it's a for sale by owner situation or some other unique property that was off market and there's not an agent and you're the only agent and the seller refuses to pay the agent. But if you bought this on an MLS or any sort of public listing, typically there's no agent fees. The seller will pay the agent. However, I like finding my number in my market right now. It's about 3% of the purchase price will be closing costs. I've seen some of these be closer to 4, 5%. So talk to your real estate agent, talk to your mortgage lender. What is the average right now in our city, in our time at this price point for closing costs? They're going to give you an average based on your purchase price. So where does this money go? These extra fees that are not my down payment, right? Half goes to cost of closing, half are prepaid. Now, the higher your price point that you go up, it difference. So if it's around a $100,000 property, it's probably 3%. If you're buying a $500,000 property, it might be 2.5%. If you're buying $1 million property, it might be 1%. Again, confirm what is the average closing cost with your agent in your market, with your lender as well. They should both have a ballpark number to give you that you can kind of just estimate extra money that you need at closing table, because this money goes to the cost of closing and to some prepaids. So let's break down a $100,000 offer here. If you're buying a property, $100,000, and your market is 3%, you have to bring an extra $3,000 for closing costs. It can be negotiated that the seller pays for some or all or a portion of this closing cost. Typically, by default, it's on the buyer, but just know that this is a conversation that you can have or be prepared for it. So in this scenario, that's $3,000. Half of it, let's say $1,500, is going to go to the mortgage lender. The mortgage lender needs to make money. They're in the business of giving you money, and there's a cost associated with that. The closing attorney is in the business of closing the deal and making sure all the paperwork's done properly and recording it and making sure you're the new owner. There's a fee associated with that. So roughly half of your closing costs are going to be whatever the fee the mortgage lender has and whatever fee the closing attorney has. The other half on this situation, $1,500, is you are going to have to prepay your home insurance roughly 1 to 3 months in advance. Some cases I've seen 6 months. And you're going to have to prepay your property tax and some interest on the loan. This is because the mortgage lender doesn't want to give you a mortgage and you instantly stop paying home insurance and property tax on it and you default and the house burns down and you're not protected. So at the closing, they take prepaid 1, 2, 3 months in advance of your property taxes being paid, your home insurance being paid, and sometimes interest on the loan. This is normal and fine, and these are costs that you would have to pay anyway. They just take it 2 to 3 months in advance at the closing table, and this will be spelled out on your closing documents that they provide you 3 days before closing. Now, here is the sweet thing. Your first mortgage payment is actually not the first of the month right after closing. In most cases, it'll be 45 to 60 days after you close. So you really sort of have a month to a month and a half to make that first mortgage payment, which is great. If it's vacant, it gives you time to get it filled. If it's already there, you're making a little bit of money without having to do an extra mortgage payment. And this sort of carryover period is paid at the closing table, just the interest on the loan. And just know that you will not have to cut a mortgage payment immediately on the first following the closing. It's typically going to be 45 to 60 days after closing. Your mortgage lender can give you the exact day and time and amount that first mortgage payment will come way in advance of the closing, so you're not caught off guard. If you're buying a property with tenants in it, I love this scenario. You get credit for the prorated rent. So let's say it's $1,000 and there's 30 days in the month. Well, if you're closing on the first and they've already collected the rent, you get $1,000 credit because you own the house for the entire month. If it's on the 15th of your closing, prorated, you would get $500 because you've only owned that property for half the month. The first half goes to the seller. They get $500 of the rent, and you get $500 of the rent for your half of the month. So picking a closing date that gives you an advantage of prorated is great. I sort of like the 5th or 6th as the time to close because then I don't have to collect that first payment. The current owner already has collected it, and then I get a pretty heavy prorated amount of the rent right off the bat, which will lower my closing costs because I just get it as a credit. Same if there's security deposits, they will transfer at closing and they will show up on your closing documents 3 days in advance as well, so that you get credit for those. That money doesn't belong to you. You get credit for it. But if the tenant moves out and abides by the lease, you return that security deposit. But just know you should collect that at the closing table. All right, the next thing to consider when you're at the closing table, you've gotten that far. You've done everything as expected. In most cases, when you get to the closing table, you have to understand who the attorney is representing. By default, the attorney is representing the mortgage lender. This is fine. You're the buyer. Your partner in this is the mortgage lender, and the mortgage lender is making you get in a closing attorney to make sure that the deed is done correctly, that there's no liens on the property, that a transfer is fine. So by extension, they are sort of on your side because the mortgage lender is making sure that everything's done properly. There are states, and when I lived in New York, both sides had to get their own attorney. There were extra costs, and then the attorneys each represented their own client. You're welcome to get your own attorney. Just talk to the closing attorney. Say, hey, who are you representing? You don't have to wait till the closing table. They'll be reaching out to you way in advance to get your contact information, your wire information, things like that. Just have that conversation. It's good to know. If they're only representing the seller, it happens, and that's okay. That's fine. Typically, that'll happen in a for sale by owner situation, or maybe someone who doesn't have a mortgage or anything like that. If you're buying, it's good to know this information. So if there is a negotiation or if there is a problem, you can, negotiate it with a different lens and maybe a different negotiation tactic. But your real estate agent should also be able to answer that for you and or navigate any difficult conversations that may arise at the closing table. But there shouldn't be any surprises because you've gotten all the documents 3 days in advance. And that should give you plenty of time to ask all your questions before you get to the closing table with your lender, with the attorney, and with your agent. Now, after your wrists are sore from signing so many documents at the closing table of nonsense, paperwork, it's just the way it is. That's a rite of passage to sign so many papers over and over again. You are now closed. Congratulations. This is what to expect after the closing. Immediately as you walk out the door, just be aware this is recorded publicly. The sale price, the buyers, the sellers, the mortgage lender, the agent involved. This is all in a recorded public document, which means you're going to get a lot of junk mail all of a sudden. There's going to be people mailing you saying you can now buy your deed or go buy your real estate records. Ignore all this. It's all free for you, and you should already have it, or you don't even need it. If you go down to the city, they'll give it to you for free, but they prey on home buyers and new people saying you've got to do this, and they'll send you fake mail that looks like it's coming from your mortgage company, but it's really not. It'll say, hey, regarding your mortgage with blank mortgage company, and you open it up and it's a different mortgage company trying to sell you something. Just be careful. There's a lot of scammers and fishers out there monitoring new real estate transactions. You'll want to transfer all the utilities in your name ASAP because, especially if there's tenants there, you're now responsible for the utilities that the lease says you're responsible for. Many cases, none. The tenant's responsible for all of them, but be aware of what utilities need to be transferred in your name ASAP. You'll want to change the locks unless there's maybe tenants there. If it's vacant, I would. You don't know how many copies are out there, how many people have these copies, who has these copies. It's good to just start fresh with your own copy of the locks. You'll want to get your contractor access ASAP. Hopefully you've already arranged this in advance and said, I'm closing on this date. When can you start work? No one's going to let you work on their property prior to closing. There's just too much liability there. So try to schedule your contractor to start as soon as possible after closing. Finally, this is super important. You've come all this way. You've done all the research, the due diligence. You've taken the flywheel and you've taken your knowledge and turned it into confidence and turned it into action. And now you're about to turn it into experience. Congratulations. This is the most important thing you do next if you're a true real estate investor. You want to immediately start looking for your next property. That's right. Believe it or not, this is really what you want to do. You close, you do all these lock changes. Don't let it get away from you. Reach out back to your mortgage lender, back to your agent and say, hey, this is great. My goal is to buy more of this type of property. Let me know if you have another one. My mortgage lender, I'm already talking to see what I can be approved for my next one or what I need to get done to get a pre-approved for another property. You want to keep that momentum going, okay? It's going to sound like you're moving fast, but you never know when that next deal is going to start. So if you let all the parties involved saying my intentions are to buy another property, where do I stand? Or bring it to me if you do find this deal that I'm looking for that fits my buy box. Get that information out there and they're going to start taking you seriously and they're going to start sending you deals after deals. And it could be you can't afford it now, but you need to have that conversation and you got to hear it. And they might say, hey, when you get a raise for $10,000, then we can get you another one, or you pay off this credit card debt or whatever it is. You need to know your game plan to buy your next property. And that starts immediately after the closing table and everyone's happy, riding a high. And of course, they're going to work with you again. Let's do it again. Now that you bought or are ready to buy your investment property, all you got to do is repeat these steps until you reach property number 5. Once you get to your 5th property, you will have to use different tactics, strategies, products, loans. It's a different world to grow your portfolio from 5 to 100 plus, which is why we offer here at House Money Media a season 2 course. That makes you a season 2 investor where you can scale your portfolio from 4 to 100 plus properties and everything in between. So sign up when you're ready to really grow your real estate portfolio. So congratulations, you've made it to the end. You evaluated the property. You're a landlord. You now have the experience starting minutes in after closing of being a landlord. And this is when things start getting rosy. There's going to be a lot of work, upfront work. That's real estate investing. It's leveraged income. You got to do a lot of upfront work, get it set up, get it ready, get it in place. And then the longer you own the property, the more you know about it, the systems and the teams you have in place, the easier it gets month to month, year to year. And my property is 10, 15 years in. I don't even know who the tenants are. The property management companies take care of it and everything's just on autopilot, but it didn't start that way day one. So congratulations. You are an investor and I'm so excited for you. Please let us know, comment, let us know. I took the course and I bought my first property or I bought my next property. Tag us, tag House Money Media. We want to celebrate with you and we want to share that experience with you. And you want the world to know, hey, I bought a duplex and I'm going to do XYZ with it. And, oh, I've got one of these, or you want to start, branding yourself as an investor of that certain property type. So those deals start organically finding you as well. Congratulations. I'm glad you made it this far. If you have any questions, reach out to the House Money Media team and we got your back.